The Turkish War of Independence perhaps should be called the Turkish Miracle, as the Turks managed to defeat Greece, France and the United Kingdom. This victory gave birth to a Turkish Republic, which reclaimed most of the Anatolian Peninsula. How did this happen? And most importantly for this video, what if it hadn't? Before we get into the Turkish War of Independence, I need to give you some context for the First World War. The reason for that is that the Turkish War of Independence happened immediately after it. This makes it even more impressive in my eyes, as the Ottoman Empire just got defeated, but Turkey managed to revive itself and come out on top. At the beginning of the summer of 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, were killed in Bosnian Sarajevo. The assassins were ethnic Serbs there, led by Gavril Princip. The Austrian Emperor, Francis Joseph I, responds to this with an ultimatum in which the Kingdom of Serbia is to become a puppet state of the Habsburg monarchy. Serbian King Peter I refuses to accept the ultimatum, which leads to a declaration of war a month later. The German Empire, which was an ally of Austria-Hungary, subsequently declared war on the Russian Empire and even on France. As for the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed V, he is initially debating where to join the Entente or the Central Powers. After the United Kingdom refused to send cruisers that were originally constructed for the Ottoman fleet, Mehmed V decided to declare war on the Entente. The Ottoman fleet, supported by German cruisers, began to destroy Russian Black Sea ports. On November 1, 1914, the Russian Tsar Nicholas II responded by declaring war on Mehmed V. The French and the British also did on the same day. The entry of the Ottoman Empire into the war against the Entente opened up a number of new battlefields in the Middle East. In the Caucasus, the fighting between the Russians and the Ottomans soon flared up on the mutual border. The British clashed with the Ottomans in the battles of Sinai, Persia and Mesopotamia. Since 1915, a large-scale genocide of the Armenian population has been taking place in northeastern Turkey. This gave the Russian army even more determination to liberate the Armenian people at any cost, which they would eventually succeed in doing. In the second half of 1916, there was an Arab uprising in the Hejaz, supported by the British. Thanks to the officer Thomas Edward Lawrence, an important railway was cut during the revolution, due to which the Turks once again began to have problems supplying their army. Simultaneously, with the outbreak of the Arab Revolt, the Egyptian Expeditionary Force went on the offensive in the Sinai front. A chaotic situation prevailed after February and October revolutions on the Caucasian front, where the Russian army was disintegrating and the Russians were retreating from previously conquered positions in eastern Anatolia during 1917. In 1918, the Ottoman army under the command of Enver Pasha managed to occupy most of Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan, including the oil-producing city of Baku. With the help of their Arab allies, the British under the command of General Allenby defeated the Ottoman troops at the Battle of Megiddo in September 1918, after which the British occupied Nazareth, Haifa and crossed the Jordan River. After the defeat at Megiddo, the Ottoman defenses in Syrian Palestine front collapsed, and in October, the British and the Arabs also occupied the cities of Damascus and Aleppo. The French, who had landed in Lebanon, occupied the port city of Beirut. The disintegration of the depleted army and the Entente troops advanced on the capital, eventually forcing the Ottoman Empire to capitulate. The Armistice of Mudros was signed by the Ottomans on October 30th on the Aegean island of Lemnos. The Ottoman Empire was in ruins, Constantinople was occupied, Great Britain gained Iraq, Palestine and Jordan, France gained Syria and Lebanon, and Greece occupied the Anatolian coast. The Italians were also promised some lands. This would leave an independent Turkish state with just these borders. Compared to what the Ottoman Empire had, you can see why it made many people mad. A war hero, Mustafa Kemal, decided to issue the Declaration of Independence in 1919, but the newly elected parliament was occupied by the British. Kemal was forced to take refuge in Ankara, where he established the Grand National Assembly. In 1920, the Soviet government and the Ankara-based Grand National Assembly signed the Treaty of Moscow. It recognized the independence of the Democratic Republic of Armenia, the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Georgia, which were against the Ottoman Empire at the time. Mustafa Kemal did not accept the peace terms by the Entente, according to which the Armenians were supposed to gain independence and Kurdistan autonomy. When the Greek army began to push the Kemalists into the mountains during the Greco-Turkish War, Kemal launched a counter-offensive that would eventually drive the Greeks out. Several tens of thousands of Greeks and Armenians perished during the attack on Smyrna. In 1922, the Sultanate was abolished, ending the Ottoman Empire. The Great Powers finally decided to back down. The Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 finally demarcated Turkey's borders, with Armenian and Kurdish demands for independence being ignored. The occupation of Constantinople by the victorious powers ended, and Turkey didn't have to pay any war reparations. Turkey then became a republic and Mustafa Kemal became its first president. But how did Mustafa Kemal and his Turkish national movement manage to expel the European occupiers from Asia Minor, especially after just losing the First World War? The main factor was the direct cooperation with Soviet Russia, the aim of which was to weaken both the British and the French, so that they would stop poking their noses into the civil war in Russia. For the Bolsheviks, the Turks were a welcome ally. They also sent communist ideas and their promoters to Asia Minor, with material support. Since 1920 to 1922, the Bolsheviks supplied the Turks with 39,000 rifles, 327 machine guns, 54 cannons, 63 million rounds of ammunition, 147,000 artillery shells, 2 patrol boats and several millions in financial aid. Mustafa Kemal was able to build a modern army thanks to the Bolsheviks. But how would it look like if the communist apparatus of the Soviet Russia decided to conquer Asia Minor as part of the expansion of Bolshevism, instead of supporting the Turkish national movement? This scenario has its justification, as Leon Trotsky promoted the idea of permanent revolution, which would gradually spread to the whole world. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, as well as the future leader Joseph Stalin, promoted the theory of socialism in one country. But what if Trotsky had managed to convince Lenin and the All-Union Communist Party of the Bolsheviks to expand the workers' proletariat to the southwest? If this eventually happened, Mustafa Kemal and his poorly armed army would have no chance of resisting Greeks' attacks from the west and French attacks from the south. Under the pretext of protecting the Armenian people, the Bolsheviks would invade eastern Anatolia, which they would subsequently occupy. Without Russian infantry and support equipment, and without Russian artillery shells and guns, the Kemalist defenses on all fronts would quickly collapse like a house of cards. Eastern Anatolia would be occupied once again, this time by the Red Army. The Kurdish territory will be controlled by French colonial army. The southern coast of the former Ottoman Empire will be guarded by the Italians. And the entire western coast of Anatolia, including Istanbul and Izmir, will be annexed by the Kingdom of Greece. Istanbul is renamed back to Constantinople, fulfilling the Megali idea at the same time. Thanks to this, the monarchy does not fall in the Kingdom of Greece, and thanks to the newly acquired territory, the Greek economy begins to slowly recover. Equally well is the Kingdom of Italy, which, thanks to its control over the southern Turkish coast, does not feel betrayed by the Entente states. This makes the nationalists led by Benito Mussolini less popular. Although the Italian economy is still plagued by inflation, unemployment and above all, corruption, it is possible that King Victor Emmanuel III of Italy could hold the country together without having to appoint Mussolini as prime minister. In the worst case, there would be a transition from a constitutional to an absolutist monarchy. The question remains how the whole world would develop from the 1920s. As Lenin was persuaded by Trotsky to occupy northern and eastern Anatolia, which was finally successfully done, it was not Stalin who would become the leader of the Soviet Union, but Trotsky, whose now popular theory of permanent revolution embraces the souls of the working people all over former Russia. While Turkey is in the hands of the victorious European powers, the Soviet Union begins to develop in a completely different direction. In any case, there is a violent collectivization of agriculture and the breaking of power of the Orthodox Church. But there are no major famines in Ukraine, because Trotsky, for pragmatic reasons, unlike Stalin, will not export Ukrainian and Cuban grain, but will try to import as much food as possible into the Soviet Union, in order to prepare for eventual expansion to the west. A great opportunity for the expansion of Bolshevism, or rather Trotskyism, is represented by the Great Depression, due to which most of the world's economies will begin to collapse like dominoes. The great popularity of Trotskyism is seen especially in Spain, France, Germany and Poland. In Spain, the monarchy is abolished at the end of 1930 and the republic is proclaimed at the beginning of 1931. thanks to the fact that the left-wing parties, Social Democrats, Communists and Anarchists, are more united thanks to the absence of Stalinism. The rise of Trotskyism in the Iberian Peninsula is only a matter of time. In France, which was brutally affected by unemployment and subsequent strikes, the Popular Front was created much earlier, just after the proclamation of the Second Spanish Republic. Léon Blum becomes the prime minister, while moderate communist leader René Nicot becomes president of France shortly after. In response, in January 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Although there was never an ultranationalist takeover in the Kingdom of Italy, the fear of anarchism and Bolshevism inspires confidence in National Socialism among the German people. However, the Japanese Empire remains a constitutional monarchy, as there is no fascist state in the world until then that would inspire the Japanese to nationalist ideas. Eventually, a coalition between Chiang Kai-shek and Hirohito will emerge in this region due to fear of Russian Trotskyism. The Chinese United Front is thus replaced by East Asian United Front in this timeline. There is a brutal persecution of Chinese socialists and communists. Wang Ming flees to communist-ruled Mongolia, while Mao Zedong flees with his followers to Xinjiang, where he establishes the Chinese Peasant Republic. Meanwhile, in Poland, in 1934, after the establishment of the April Constitution, there is a civil war between the so-called Sanakia in the west and radicalized peasants in the south and the east. Leon Trotsky utilizes this situation and, within the so-called liberation of the Polish working people from the aggressive bourgeoisie, orders the Red Army to enter Poland. In Berlin, representatives of Germany, Britain and Italy will meet quickly to decide the fate of the Polish state. The three countries reach an agreement which allows the German Reich to annex all Polish territories that belong to the German Empire before the end of the Great War. Poland is treated similarly to Czechoslovakia after the Munich Agreement in 1938. Eastern Poland becomes part of the Soviet Union, and the Free City of Gdansk, the Gdansk Corridor, Poznan and Katowice provinces are occupied by the Wehrmacht. The Red Army eventually withdraws from the rest of Poland under pressure from all three European powers. But after the coup d'etat in 1937, Poland falls into the Soviet sphere of influence, de facto becoming a Soviet puppet. Meanwhile, a civil war is taking place in Spain, but it's not going well for the nationalists led by Emilio Mola and Francisco Franco. France, under the rule of moderate communists and socialists, sends some munitions, volunteers and tanks to the Iberian Peninsula, as well as the Soviet Union. As a result, relations between France and Britain deteriorate rapidly. Although France is still not a communist state, it greatly influences the events in Europe. After the defeat of the nationalists in 1939, the moderate communist Joan Gorkin becomes the new Spanish leader. Spain thus becomes a People's Republic. Attention is thus growing in Europe. As early as 1936, the Berlin-London-Rome axis was created, while France and Spain began to get closer and closer to the Soviet Union. How the world will continue to develop is not certain. The eventual Second World War may look completely different, only because Turkey never became a free country as a result of Trotsky's political initiative. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.